Jake Morrison wiped the grease from his hands with an old rag as he walked home from work. The auto shop had been slow today, just like every other day this month. His boss kept talking about closing down, and Jake needed the job. Detroit wasn't exactly full of opportunities for a guy who only knew how to fix cars. He took a shortcut through the old factory district where most of the buildings stood empty. Broken windows stared down at him like dead eyes. Weeds grew through cracks in the sidewalk. This part of town had been dying for years. Jake stopped walking when he saw something that didn't belong. Between two abandoned warehouses, someone had set up what looked like the world's strangest yard sale. Tables covered with weird objects stretched across an empty lot. Most of the stuff looked like it came from a science fiction movie. Chrome, gadgets with blinking lights, metal sculptures that seemed to move on their own, tools that hurt his eyes to look at. Behind the tables stood the strangest person Jake had ever seen. The guy was short and thin with blue-gray skin. His head was too big for his body, and he had 4 arms instead of 2. Large black eyes looked nervous as they darted around the empty lot. Jake rubbed his eyes and looked again. The weird guy was still there. "You interested in buying something, human?" The strange person's voice sounded like gravel in a blender. "Everything must go today. I need to leave this planet very soon." Jake's brain struggled to process what he was seeing. This had to be some kind of joke. Maybe they were filming a movie. But the guy looked so real, and his accent didn't sound like any Jake had heard before. What exactly are you selling?" Jake asked, stepping closer to the tables. "Galactic surplus," the blue guy said. "I am Crix, licensed trader from the vegan system. These items are perfectly legal on most worlds." He paused and looked worried. "Well, mostly legal. Some might be considered questionable by local authorities." Jake picked up something that looked like a flashlight, but felt warm and hummed softly. When he pointed it at a pile of old newspapers, they burst into flames. "Careful with the plasma torch," Crix said, taking it away from Jake. "Very dangerous in untrained hands. Perhaps you would prefer something safer?" Jake looked around the lot and noticed something big covered by a dirty tarp in the corner. "What's under there?" Crix followed his gaze and his shoulders slumped. "Transportation. Unit. Very old. Many problems. I cannot afford to repair it, and I cannot afford to transport it off-world. It just takes up space. Can I see it?" Crix shrugged with all 4 arms. "Why not? But I warn you, it is not impressive." He pulled away the tarp, and Jake's jaw dropped. Underneath was what could only be described as a spaceship. It was about the size of a small bus, with a dull metal hull covered in dents and scorch marks. Strange symbols were painted on the sides, mostly faded. One wing hung at an odd angle, and several panels were missing completely. "It flies?" Jake asked. "Sometimes," Crix said. "When it feels like it. The engine makes terrible noises. The life support system smells like dead fish. The navigation computer only speaks ancient Regelian, which nobody understands anymore. Oh, and there is a small problem with the cargo hold." "What kind of problem?" Crix looked uncomfortable. "There is something living in there. Previous owner left it behind. I cannot get it out, and I cannot get close enough to see what it is. It makes angry noises and shoots fire sometimes." Jake stared at the beat-up spaceship. This was either the best prank in history, or he was losing his mind. But something about it felt real. The metal was real. The strange smell coming from it was real. Even Crix seemed too weird to be fake. "How much?" Jake heard himself ask. "For the ship?" Crix laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You could not afford it, human. Even broken, it is worth thousands of your Earth dollars. Try me." Crix studied Jake's work clothes and dirty hands. You do not look wealthy." Jake pulled out his wallet and counted his money. He had exactly $7.32, not even enough for dinner. "I've got $5, Jake said. "Cash?" Crick stared at him. $5 for a starship? "It's all I have. You said you need to leave today, right? And you can't take it with you." The alien trader looked around the empty lot. No other customers had shown up all day. In the distance, Jake could hear sirens. Crix heard them too, and started packing his smaller items quickly. "This is crazy," Crix muttered. "My grandfather would disown me. $5 for a ship, it cost me 50,000 credits. He looked at the approaching sunset. "But I really do need to leave. The local authorities are asking questions about my business license." Jake held out a crumpled $5 bill. Crix snatched it with one of his 4 hands. "Deal, but I warn you, human. That ship will bring you nothing but trouble. Whatever is in the cargo hold has been eating my food supplies for months, and it has a very bad attitude. I'll take my chances." Crix pressed a small device into Jake's hand. Remote control for the ship. "Press the red button to open the main door. Do not press any other buttons until you read the manual." He paused. "There is no manual. I lost it years ago." The alien grabbed his remaining boxes and hurried toward a small silver craft hidden behind one of the warehouses. "Good luck, human. You will need it." Within minutes, Crix was gone. His ship shot up into the evening sky and disappeared among the stars. Jake stood alone in the empty lot, holding a remote control and staring at his $5 spaceship. The smart thing would be to walk away and pretend this never happened. But he had never been accused of being smart. He pressed the red button. The ship's main door opened with a loud hiss and a grinding noise that sounded like it needed oil. Badly. A ramp extended from the doorway to the ground. Lights flickered on inside, revealing a narrow corridor that curved out of sight. Jake took a deep breath and walked up the ramp. The moment his feet touched the ship's floor, he heard a loud roar echo from somewhere deep inside. Something big was definitely living in there, and it did not sound happy to have visitors. "Hello?" Jake called out. "Anybody home?" The roar came again, louder this time. It was followed by what sounded like cursing in a language Jake didn't recognize. Then he heard a voice, speaking clear English with a strange accent. "About time. Someone showed up. Do you have any idea how boring it gets in here? And the food has been terrible. I don't suppose you brought anything decent to eat?" Jake realized his $5 purchase had just gotten a lot more complicated. Jake walked slowly down the narrow corridor inside his new spaceship. The walls were covered with buttons and screens that showed numbers and symbols he couldn't read. Everything hummed and beeped softly. The smell wasn't as bad as Crix had said, but it definitely didn't smell like anything on Earth. "Are you going to stand there all day, or are you going to let me out?" The voice came from somewhere ahead. It sounded female, and very annoyed. Jake followed the voice through the corridor until he reached a heavy metal door marked with warning signs in alien languages. He could hear movement behind it, something big shifting around. A small window in the door showed only darkness. "Hello?" Jake called through the door. "I'm Jake. I just bought this ship." "Bought it?" The voice sounded surprised. "From that idiot?" "Crix? About time. I've been stuck in here for 3 months. The door locks can only be opened from outside, and Mr. Forearms was too scared to come near me." "What are you exactly?" There was a pause. "You humans have a word for creatures like me. You call us dragons, though technically I'm a wyvern. The name's Ember." Jake stared at the door. A dragon. He had bought a spaceship with a dragon inside. This day kept getting weirder. "Are you going to eat me if I let you out?" Ember made a sound that might have been laughter. Not unless you're really annoying. I prefer my food cooked anyway, and you smell like motor oil. That would ruin the taste. Jake found a control panel next to the door. Most of the buttons were labeled in alien writing, but one had a picture that looked like an opening door. He pressed it. The door slid open with a loud clang. The room beyond was much larger than Jake had expected, taking up most of the ship's cargo area. And sitting in the middle of it was a dragon. Ember was about the size of a small car, with dark, red scales that seemed to glow in the dim light. She had wings folded against her back, 4 legs with claws that could probably tear through steel, and a long neck that ended in a head full of very sharp teeth. Her eyes were bright gold and looked far too intelligent. Finally, Ember said, stretching her wings, "Do you know how cramped it gets in here? And the entertainment system is broken. I've been reading the same technical manual for weeks." Jake took a step back. "You can really talk." "Of course I can talk. What did you expect? Roaring and treasure hoarding? That's just silly human stories." Ember looked Jake up and down. "Though, I have to say, you're not what I expected either. Most humans who end up with illegal alien ships are either criminals or idiots. You look like a mechanic. I am a mechanic from Detroit. That explains the motor oil smell." Ember stood up and stretched like a giant cat. "So what's the plan? Are you going to turn me in for the bounty? Or are we going to get off this mudball of a planet? There's a bounty on you?" "Oh, yes. I'm worth quite a bit to the right people. I used to fight in the gladiator pits on Nexus Station. Won a lot of matches, made a lot of enemies. Some very rich, very angry enemies." Jake sat down heavily on a crate. This was too much to process. Dragons, spaceships, bounties, gladiator fights. Yesterday, his biggest problem was a broken transmission on a pickup truck. "I don't know anything about spaceships," Jake said. "I can fix cars, but this thing is way beyond me." Ember tilted her head. "Actually, the basic principles are the same. Engines, fuel systems, electrical connections. The technology is different, but the concepts are similar. I could teach you. You know about spaceship engines? I know about a lot of things. When you're locked in a cargo hold for months, you pick up technical manuals to pass the time. Plus, I've been listening to this ship's systems. It's not as broken as that trader thought." Jake looked around the cargo hold. "So what do we do now?" "Well, we could sit here and wait for someone to find us." Crix wasn't very careful about covering his tracks. "Or we could take the ship for a test drive and see what happens. I don't know how to fly a spaceship. Neither did most humans when they first started driving cars. You figured that out, didn't you?" Before Jake could argue, alarms started beeping. Throughout the ship, red lights flashed on the walls. Ember's head snapped up, and her eyes narrowed. "That's the proximity alarm," she said. "Someone's coming? Fast." Jake ran to the nearest window and looked out. 3 black vehicles were racing across the empty lot toward the ship. They didn't look like police cars. "Friends of yours?" Jake asked. "Not likely. Probably bounty hunters." Word travels fast in the criminal community. Ember moved toward the corridor. "We need to leave. Now. But I don't know how to fly this thing." "Then you better learn quickly. The alternative is explaining to some very unfriendly people why you have their target in your cargo hold." Jake followed Ember to what looked like the ship's control room. It was full of screens, buttons, and controls that made no sense to him. Ember jumped onto a chair that seemed designed for someone with 4 arms. "Sit there," she said, pointing to another chair. "Put your hands on those 2 controls. When I say go, push the left one forward and pull the right one back. What will that do? Hopefully, it will get us off the ground before those bounty hunters reach us." Through the front window, Jake could see armed figures getting out of the vehicles. They were moving toward the ship with weapons drawn. Ember, I really don't think this is a good idea. Trust me. I've seen how this ship works. It's actually quite simple once you understand the basics. One of the figures outside raised what looked like a rocket launcher. Go! Ember shouted. Jake pushed the left control forward and pulled the right one back. The ship lurched upward with a sound like a freight train having an argument with a blender. Jake's stomach dropped as they shot into the sky. Not bad for a first try, Ember said, though she looked a little green around the gills. Now we just need to get out of the atmosphere before they send more ships after us. Jake gripped the controls as the ship climbed higher. The ground fell away below them, and soon he could see the curve of the earth. Stars appeared in the darkening sky. This is impossible, Jake muttered. I'm flying a spaceship with a dragon. Wyvern, Ember corrected. And you're doing better than I expected. Most humans crash within the first few minutes. That's not reassuring. Warning lights started flashing on the control panel. Ember studied the displays and frowned. We have a problem, she said. The autopilot just engaged. It's following a pre-programmed course. Where to? According to this, we're heading for Nexus Station. That's where Crix was supposed to deliver me. Can we turn it off? Not from here. The override controls are in the engine room, and I'm too big to fit through the corridors. Jake looked at the vast emptiness of space outside the window. They were accelerating away from Earth at a speed that made his head spin. How long until we get there? 3 days. Maybe 4 if the engines don't break down. Jake leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. 3 days ago, his biggest worry was paying rent. Now he was flying through space with a gladiator dragon, heading for an alien space station, probably being chased by bounty hunters. Ember, he said, I think I made a mistake buying this ship. Maybe, Ember replied, but it's going to be an interesting mistake. Outside the window, Earth grew smaller and smaller until it was just another point of light among the stars. Jake was no longer a mechanic from Detroit. He was an accidental astronaut, and there was no going back. 3 days later, Jake stared out the ship's window at the biggest structure he had ever seen. Nexus Station looked like someone had built a city in space and then kept adding to it for 1,000 years. Towers and domes stuck out in every direction. Ships of all shapes and sizes moved around it like metal fish. Welcome to the crossroads of the galaxy, Ember said from beside him. Every species, every trade route, every kind of trouble you can imagine passes through here. Jake had learned a lot during their 3-day journey. Ember had taught him basic alien languages, how to read star charts, and which foods from the ship's storage wouldn't kill him. She had also been teaching him about galactic politics, which seemed to involve a lot of shooting and very little actual governing. So what's the plan? Jake asked as they approached the station's docking bay. We dock, we get supplies, we figure out our next move. Try not to talk to anyone unless you have to. Humans are rare out here, and you'll attract attention. The docking process was surprisingly simple. The station's computer systems guided their ship into a berth automatically. Jake had expected it to be like parallel parking, but harder. Instead, it was like being gently caught by invisible hands. They walked down the ship's ramp into the docking bay. Jake tried not to stare at the other beings moving around them. There were tall blue people with too many arms, short, furry creatures that looked like talking bears, and things that didn't look like anything he could describe. Stay close, Ember whispered, and remember, I'm your pet. Dangerous pets are common here, so nobody will think it's strange. You're not really my pet. I know that, and you know that. But everyone else thinks humans are primitive creatures who collect dangerous animals. Let them think it. They made it about 50 feet into the station before someone recognized Ember. Hey, a voice shouted. That's the wyvern from the fighting pits. Jake turned to see a group of rough-looking aliens pointing at them. One was already talking into a communication device. "Run," Ember said quietly. They ran. The station was like a maze of corridors, shops, and open areas filled with beings from dozens of different worlds. Jake and Ember pushed through crowds of traders, tourists, and spacers. Behind them, Jake could hear shouting and the sound of heavy footsteps following. "This way," Ember said, diving into a narrow side passage. They found themselves in what looked like a marketplace. Stalls sold everything from glowing fruit to weapons that hummed with energy. The smell was incredible, a mix of spices, ozone, and things Jake didn't want to identify. "Keep moving," Ember said. "Don't stop for anything." A plasma bolt shot past Jake's head, leaving a smoking hole in a nearby wall. More shouts came from behind them. It seemed like their pursuers had friends. Jake grabbed a cart full of what looked like metal pineapples and pushed it into the path of their chasers. The cart tipped over, spilling its contents across the floor. The pursuing alien slipped and slid on the rolling fruit. "Nice thinking," Ember said. "Very human." "What's that supposed to mean?" "Humans solve problems by breaking things and making messes. It's actually quite effective." They ducked into another corridor, this one lined with shops selling technical equipment. Jake's mechanic brain automatically started cataloging the tools and parts he saw. Some of it looked familiar, just built with different materials and more lights. "In here," Ember said, pulling him into a shop that sold ship parts. The shop owner was a massive creature that looked like a cross between a bear and a tree. It had bark-like skin and eyes that glowed green. "We need a place to hide," Ember said. In what Jake now recognized as basic galactic, the creature looked them over slowly. "You're the ones causing trouble in the marketplace. We didn't start it." "Never do," the creature rumbled. "Back room, 5 minutes. Then you leave." They hurried into a storage area filled with engine parts and electronic components. Jake couldn't help but examine some of the equipment. It was more advanced than anything on Earth, but the basic principles were the same. "How much trouble are we in?" Jake asked. "Depends on how many people recognized me, and how much the bounty on my head has gone up." Ember looked worried. "I may have understated my value earlier." "What do you mean? I wasn't just any gladiator. I was champion of the Nexus fighting circuits for 2 years. I won a lot of matches, made a lot of money for some very powerful people. When I escaped, they lost their biggest draw." Jake stared at her. "You're famous? Infamous, more like. There are probably wanted posters with my picture all over the station by now." As if to prove her point, they could hear announcements echoing through the station corridors. Jake couldn't understand the words, but he recognized Ember's name being repeated. "We need to get back to the ship," Jake said. "Agreed, but they'll be watching it now. We need a distraction." Jake looked around the storage room and got an idea. What if we gave them something else to worry about? He started pulling components off the shelves, connecting them with cables and power cells. His hands worked automatically, following patterns he knew from years of fixing Earth machinery. "What are you building?" Ember asked. "Not sure yet." "Something loud and flashy." Jake connected a power source to what looked like a sound amplifier, then linked it to several devices that seemed to control lights and displays. He added a timer mechanism he had seen on other equipment. "This should cause some chaos," he said, setting the timer for 2 minutes. "Let's go." They slipped out of the shop through a back exit. Jake could hear the shop owner grumbling about humans and their tendency to break things. They moved quickly through service corridors, following signs that Ember translated. Behind them, Jake's improvised device activated. Alarms started blaring throughout that section of the station. Lights flashed in patterns that hurt to look at. The sound was loud enough to rattle the metal walls. "What did you do?" Ember asked as they ran. "I think I accidentally triggered the station's emergency systems." "Oops." Security forces rushed past them, heading toward the chaos Jake had created. Most of the bounty hunters seemed to be following the security teams, probably thinking the distraction was connected to their escape. They made it back to the docking bay without being caught. But when they reached their ship, they found someone waiting for them. A tall, thin alien in expensive clothes stood near their ship's ramp. He had pale skin, no hair, and eyes like black marbles. 2 heavily armed guards flanked him. "Mr. Morrison," the alien said in perfect English. "My name is Commander Zek. I represent certain business interests on this station. We need to talk." Jake looked at Ember, who was tensing for a fight. "About what?" "About the ship you purchased. And about your companion. You see, there are things about both that you don't understand. Dangerous things. Such as?" Commander Zek smiled, showing teeth that were too sharp. "Such as the fact that your ship contains information worth more than most planets. And your wyvern friend knows exactly where to find it." Ember's eyes narrowed. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you do. Captain Vex told you before he disappeared. The coordinates are hidden in the ship's navigation system. We've been looking for them for a very long time." Jake felt his heart sink. His $5 spaceship was apparently much more valuable than anyone had told him, and much more dangerous. "What kind of coordinates?" he asked. "The location of something that could change the balance of power in this galaxy," Commander Zek said. "Something that many people would kill for." The commander's guards raised their weapons. "You're coming with us, both of you. There are people who want to meet you very badly." Jake looked around the docking bay. More armed figures were moving to surround them. There was no easy way out this time. "Any ideas?" he whispered to Ember. "Just one," she whispered back. "Hold on tight." Ember suddenly roared, a sound that echoed through the entire docking bay. It wasn't just loud, it was felt as much as heard. Every being in the area stopped what they were doing and turned to stare. Then Ember spread her wings and breathed fire. Ember's fire breath created instant chaos in the docking bay. Aliens scattered in every direction, shouting in dozens of languages. Smoke filled the air, and emergency sprinklers activated throughout the area. Commander Zek's guards stumbled backward, their weapons forgotten as they tried to avoid being roasted. Now would be good. Ember shouted over the noise. Jake ran up the ship's ramp with Ember right behind him. He threw himself into the pilot's seat and started pushing buttons, hoping he remembered what Ember had taught him during their journey. The ship's engines roared to life. Through the smoke and confusion, Jake could see more security forces running toward them. Commander Zek was pointing at their ship and shouting orders. "Go, go, go." Ember urged. Jake pushed the throttle forward. The ship shot out of the docking bay so fast that Jake's stomach stayed behind. Warning alarms blared as they cleared the station and headed into open space. "That was close," Jake said, trying to catch his breath. "Too close, and it's not over." Ember was studying the ship's displays. "We've got company." Jake looked at the rear scanner and saw 3 sleek ships following them. They were gaining fast. "Can we outrun them?" "Not in this old bucket. But we don't have to outrun them for long." Ember's claws worked the navigation controls. "I'm setting course for the Kepler system. It's only a few hours away." "What's in the Kepler system?" "Answers. And hopefully, a way to end this chase before it gets us killed." The pursuing ships opened fire. Energy bolts flashed past their windows. Jake twisted the controls, trying to dodge the incoming shots. His years of driving in Detroit traffic actually helped. Weaving between plasma bolts wasn't that different from avoiding potholes and crazy taxi drivers. "Not bad," Ember said, as Jake rolled the ship to avoid another volley. "You're getting the hang of this. I just pretend they're angry drivers on the freeway." One of the enemy shots clipped their engine. The ship shuddered, and several warning lights came on. "We need to land soon," Ember said. The engine won't take much more damage. The Kepler system appeared ahead of them. It contained a single yellow star and 3 planets. Ember directed them toward the middle planet, a world covered in red desert and strange rock formations. "What's down there?" Jake asked as they entered the atmosphere. The truth about this ship, and about why everyone wants it so badly. They landed in a canyon between towering rock spires. The pursuing ships followed them down, landing nearby. Jake could see armed figures getting out and moving toward them. "Time for the truth," Ember said. She led Jake to a part of the ship he had never seen before, behind the engine room. Hidden panels slid aside to reveal a small chamber filled with crystalline storage devices. Captain Vex, the ship's previous owner, hid these here before he disappeared, Ember explained. They contained the location of something incredible. Jake picked up one of the crystals. It felt warm and seemed to pulse with its own light. "What kind of location?" "An ancient terraforming device. It was built by a species that died out millions of years ago. The device can turn dead worlds into garden planets in a matter of days." "That sounds useful. Why hide it?" "Because in the wrong hands, the process can be reversed. Instead of creating life, it can destroy entire worlds, make them uninhabitable forever." Jake stared at the crystal in his hand. "So this is like the ultimate weapon?" "It could be. That's why Captain Vex hid the coordinates. He knew if anyone found the device, they would either use it to hold the galaxy hostage or start wars fighting over it." Heavy footsteps echoed through the ship. Their pursuers had found them. "We need to get to the device first," Ember said. "Make sure it stays hidden." "Where is it?" Ember activated the crystal Jake was holding. A holographic star map appeared in the air, showing their current location and a path leading deeper into the planet. Here, about 10 miles underground in the planet's core, the original builders hollowed out a space inside the planet to hide it. The footsteps were getting closer. Jake could hear voices speaking in basic galactic, discussing how to breach the ship's inner doors. "How do we get down there?" "The planet has natural cave systems, but we'll have to move fast. Once they realize what we're looking for, they'll bring heavy equipment to dig it out." Ember led Jake to an emergency exit in the ship's floor. It opened into a narrow shaft that dropped into darkness. "You first," she said. Jake climbed down into the cave system beneath the planet's surface. The walls glowed with a faint blue light, and the air smelled like copper and ozone. Ember followed, her claws clicking on the rocky walls. Behind them, they could hear their ship being forced open. Angry voices echoed down the shaft. The caves were like a 3-dimensional maze. Tunnels branched off in every direction, some going up, others leading deeper into the planet. Ember seemed to know where she was going, following the crystal's guidance. "How did you know about all this?" Jake asked as they climbed down a particularly steep passage. "Captain Vex told me before he was captured. He knew they would come for the ship eventually. He wanted someone to know the truth, in case something happened to him." "What did happen to him?" "Commander Zek's people caught him. Vex died rather than reveal the location. That's when they started looking for the ship. They emerged into a vast underground chamber. The walls were covered with symbols and pictures that seemed to move in the blue light. In the center of the chamber sat a massive crystalline structure that hummed with energy. "The terraforming device," Ember said quietly. Jake approached the device slowly. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. He could feel power radiating from it, like standing next to a nuclear reactor. It's been waiting here for millions of years, Ember continued. The builders left instructions, but they're in a language nobody understands anymore. Except you do understand it, don't you? Ember looked surprised. How did you know? Lucky. Guess. You know too much about this place. And you've been holding back information since we met. Ember sighed, a sound like steam escaping from a kettle. You're right. I'm not just a gladiator. I'm one of the last descendants of the dragon species that helped build this device. My people were the guardians, the ones who kept the secret. So you know how it works? I know how to activate it, and I know how to destroy it, if necessary. Footsteps echoed from the tunnels behind them. Their pursuers had found the cave system. They're coming, Jake said. What do we do? Ember moved to a control panel near the device. Ancient symbols lit up under her claws. We have 3 choices. We can activate the device and use it to terraform dead worlds, helping billions of people. We can let them take it and probably watch them use it as a weapon. Or we can destroy it and make sure nobody can ever use it. What do you think we should do? I think, Ember said, her golden eyes reflecting the device's glow. That depends on whether you trust humans to use power responsibly. Armed figures appeared at the chamber entrance. Commander Zek stepped forward, his pale face lit by the device's energy. Step away from the controls, he commanded. That device belongs to us now. Jake looked at Ember, then at the terraforming device, then at the armed aliens surrounding them. His $5 spaceship had led him to one of the most important decisions in galactic history. You know what? Jake said. I think I have a better idea. Jake walked toward the terraforming device, ignoring the weapons pointed at him. His mind was working the way it always did when he faced a broken engine or a complicated repair job. There was always a solution if you looked at the problem from the right angle. I said step away from the controls, Commander Zek repeated, his voice sharp with warning. Here's the thing, Jake said, running his hands over the ancient control panel. You're all thinking about this wrong. You see a weapon or a tool to control people. But I see something else entirely. Ember watched him carefully. What do you see? I see the biggest repair job in the galaxy. Jake's fingers found patterns in the control symbols that reminded him of circuit diagrams and hydraulic systems. The device wasn't that different from the complex machinery he fixed every day. It just worked with planets instead of cars. The original builders hid this because they were afraid people would fight over it, Jake continued. But what if nobody owned it? What if it belonged to everyone? He started pressing symbols on the control panel. The device responded, humming louder and projecting holographic displays into the air. The displays showed star charts, planet locations, and what looked like construction blueprints. What are you doing? Commander Zek demanded, stepping closer. Rewriting the programming, Jake said. Making some modifications. Ember's eyes widened as she realized what Jake was attempting. That's impossible. The original programming is millions of years old. No one understands it well enough to change. It? Maybe not the language, Jake said, but engineering is engineering. Input, process, output. Change the input, you change the output. The device began to glow brighter. New symbols appeared on the displays, mixing the ancient language with patterns that looked more familiar. Jake was essentially hot wiring a planet-making machine. Stop him! Commander Zek shouted Dot. His guards raised their weapons, but before they could fire, the cave began to shake. The terraforming device was activating, but not in the way anyone expected. Instead of focusing its power on the planet, they were standing on. Jake had redirected it outward. The device began broadcasting its knowledge across the galaxy, transmitting the complete blueprints and instructions to every inhabited world with advanced technology. You're giving it away, Ember said, understanding what Jake had done. That's right. If everyone has it, no one can use it as a weapon. And if everyone has it, then everyone can help fix the planets that need fixing. The underground chamber filled with light as the device transmitted its data. On the holographic displays, Jake could see confirmation signals coming back from dozens of worlds. Scientists, engineers, and governments across the galaxy were receiving the terraforming technology. Commander. Zek stared at the displays in horror. Do you realize what you've done? You've just made this device worthless to us. Exactly, Jake said. Now it's worthless as a weapon, but priceless as a tool for helping people. The shaking in the cave was getting stronger. The device was using enormous amounts of energy to broadcast across the galaxy, and the planet couldn't handle the strain much longer. We need to get out of here, Ember said. The cave system is collapsing. Rock and dust began falling from the ceiling. Commander Zek and his guards were already running for the tunnels, abandoning their plans to capture the device. There was no point in controlling something that everyone now possessed. Jake made one final adjustment to the controls, then followed Ember toward the exit. Behind them, the ancient terraforming device continued its broadcast, sharing millions of years of scientific knowledge with anyone who wanted to learn. They climbed through the collapsing cave system as fast as they could. The planet groaned and shook around them. By the time they reached the surface, huge cracks were opening in the desert floor. Their ship was still where they had left it, damaged but functional. Jake and Ember ran up the ramp as the ground split open beneath them. Jake threw himself into the pilot's seat and fired the engines. They lifted off just as the canyon collapsed completely. Looking back, Jake could see a column of light shooting up from the planet's core where the device continued its work. Is it going to destroy the planet? Jake asked. No, Ember said, studying the readings on their instruments. It's transforming. Look, where the desert had been, green plants were already beginning to grow. Water was bubbling up from underground springs. The device was using the last of its energy to demonstrate what it could do, turning the dead world into a garden. It's beautiful, Jake said. They flew into orbit and watched as the planet below them came to life. Forests grew and fast forward. Oceans formed in the lowlands. Clouds gathered in the sky. So what happens now? Jake asked. Now the real work begins. Ember said, every species in the galaxy will have access to terraforming technology. Some will use it wisely. Others will need help learning how. Sounds like we'll be busy. We? Jake looked at his companion, the former gladiator dragon who had become his partner in the strangest adventure of his life. Well, you're the expert on this technology, and I'm apparently good at fixing things that shouldn't work. Seems like a useful combination. Ember smiled, showing her sharp teeth. You realize we'll be traveling all over the galaxy, helping settle disputes over who gets to terraform what planet, teaching primitive species how to use advanced technology, and probably getting shot at by people who don't like our solutions. Sounds better than fixing broken transmissions in Detroit. Their ship's communication system came to life with dozens of incoming messages. Governments, scientists, and refugee groups from across the galaxy were asking for help, advice, and assistance. With their new terraforming technology, we're going to need a bigger ship, Ember said, looking at all the requests, and maybe some help. Think there are other people out there who would want to join this project? Definitely. Turns out there are a lot of species in the galaxy who just want to help others and fix things that are broken. Jake set course for the nearest space station, where they could begin coordinating the galaxy's new terraforming efforts. As they flew through space, he thought about how much his life had changed since that morning, when he walked through the abandoned factory district. He had bought a spaceship for $5 and gotten a grumpy dragon. But he had also stumbled into the most important job in the galaxy, making sure that the power to create new worlds was used to help people instead of hurt them. "Hey, Ember," Jake said as they traveled toward their next adventure. "Yeah? Thanks for not eating me when I first let you out of the cargo hold. Thanks for not turning me in for the bounty money. Thanks for teaching me how to fly this thing. Thanks for giving terraforming technology to the entire galaxy instead of keeping it for yourself." Jake grinned. "Thanks for being the best $5 purchase I ever made." Ember laughed, a sound like happy thunder. "You know, for a human, you're not completely terrible." Outside their window, the stars stretched endlessly in all directions. Somewhere out there, dead worlds were coming back to life. Refugee populations were getting new homes. Scientists were learning to heal planets that had been damaged by war or pollution. And somewhere in space, a mechanic from Detroit and a dragon from the gladiator pits were flying toward their next adventure, proving that the best deals in life sometimes come with the most unexpected complications. The end, Jake thought to himself, was really just the beginning.